Hello everyone. How are you today? Did you enjoy the party last night? Yeah, I can suppose so. Me too. Maybe a bit too much, but I think that's okay. I am Jean-Baptiste Vincey, and I work at Deezer, and I am an Android tech expert. Sorry, I have an issue with that. And today I will share with you how we try to share code among multiple projects thanks to private libraries at Deezer. So what is Deezer? Maybe you have seen that kind of bikes in Berlin. I don't know if they are still there. Oh, no. I have some troubles with the remote. I don't know if they are still there in Berlin. I took this picture, I think, 3 years ago. But actually, Deezer has little to do with bikes. And Deezer is actually mainly about music. So Deezer is a French music streaming platform. We are still based in France, but we have some offices throughout the world. Okay, I will just leave this, I think. So I was talking about Deezer, French music streaming platform. Basically, yeah, that's it. So why are we talking about multiple projects? Actually, we have quite a few applications already on top of our main application about music. So we also have an audiobook application which targets actually the German market, so you might have heard of it. We have Deezer for creators, for the artists and so on. We have Sony 360 by Deezer, and also supporting Android platforms like Android TV, Wear OS, and so on. So I will take an example with the audiobook application. As I said, it's targeting the German market. And so why do we have this application? Basically, this was an interesting opportunity for Deezer, as we had already the content, audiobooks, and an audio streaming platform. So what we were missing is just a dedicated application. And as you can imagine, and you can see already, is that this audiobook application has a lot in common with our first music application. So what can we think about? So first of all, authentication, but also player, request engine, synchronization, cache, and so on. So it would be really interesting to be able to reuse all these instead of just rewriting it every time for both applications. And this is all the more true that we are actually developing more and more applications. So we started to think how we could, we asked ourselves how we could share libraries, but first of all, what are the requirements to be able to share code among multiple projects? And first one is that the shared code should be easy to integrate. That seems pretty obvious, but actually it's not that easy to make happen. So let's keep this in mind. Second requirement, it should induce no integration delay. Third one, actually, we want to allow frequent change and API changes. This might seem a bit weird, but actually it's pretty different from open public libraries. Okay. Let's come back to the talk. So we want to allow frequent API changes. Why is that? Because our shared code doesn't have a finite scope. Since it is to support our applications and our features, and we want to move fast and to build new features and new applications, we really want to support that, to allow frequent changes, API changes. And last thing is that we really want to be appropriate for applications that have very different paces and timelines. So how can we share code among multiple projects? Of course, the answer was in the title of the talk, so libraries, you all know that already. So for the rest of the talk, we'll talk about how we manage our internal libraries at Deezer. First of all, with the modules, then we will see the content of these libraries, what can we put in it, the organization, the distribution and development process, and finally, we'll have some words about documentation and lessons learned. So first of all, libraries as modules. As you all know already, libraries are implemented as modules on Android. So either Android modules or pure Java Kotlin modules. But what I want to highlight here is that there are kind of two ways to integrate a library module into a project, into an application. Either you can reference it as a Gradle sub-project in the same Gradle project. So on the left, that means it will recompile anytime there is a change in your library module. Or on the right, you can also build an artifact, so a jar or AAR, and integrate this, compile this frozen artifact on the right. So for simplicity, we started with the first option on the left, making a single Android project with multiple applications and common library modules. We did that for our Android TV application to share code with our main mobile music application. And that worked pretty well at first. We were able to share components and features. And then time went on, and the Android TV project was paused for some time because we wanted to focus on other projects. And the mobile app went on and introduced a lot of API changes in the command module. And then we wanted to come back to our Android TV projects 3 years later. And of course, because of all the API changes, it took us about 2 months just to be able to compile again. And I'm not talking about all the behavior changes. So to sum up, it was really not a good solution for us, as it was not supporting our last requirement, which was very important for us, that we need to be able to support different applications with very specific paces and timelines. Now let's talk about content. What can we put in libraries? So first we ask ourselves, should we only put some kind of some specific layers, like only domain logic or only data or only stuff like that, only UI components? But we said finally we don't want to constrain ourselves in that matter. But what we want is just for our components to comply to some criteria. First of all, we should only share what is really common. You don't share something that is only used by a specific library, a specific application, because you don't know if it will be reused, if the component is really specific to the application, or if it's really something that you can reuse somewhere else. Second thing is that sometimes you have kind of common features, but they have some specific parts. And when that happens, we don't want to handle all the specific parts in the libraries. So what we do is we only put the core common, exactly identical part of the component, and then we let the clients, the applications, extend to introduce their own specificities. It's it's a bit similar to the open-close principle. And finally, be generic enough to be reusable, but not too much to be still maintainable. So let's take a concrete example. At Deezer, the first feature we wanted to share is actually the authentication. Why is that? Because it's quite a complex feature. There are a lot of ways to authenticate on Deezer and to register, to sign on, and so on. So we wanted to put that in library so that our applications could just call it with kind of one line of code, just navigation, like deep link navigation component, and that it will handle all the registration authentication in the library, and the client, the application doesn't have to do anything else. Well, then we realized that it wouldn't work for all of our projects. For example, it won't be usable for Android TV, for our public SDK, or for Wear OS, because these have some specific UI and also some specific ways to authenticate. But still, there are some common parts that we want to reuse, some requests or some logic from the authentication. So to support that, what we did is that we split our feature main authentication library into 3, with one library that is about core authentication, so with requests, some business logic, etc. Then a design system for the set of guidelines and reusable UI components. And on top of that, the authentication library as we first imagined. Then we can really foster reusability in the way that Android TV, Wear OS SDK can reuse the common parts from core authentication, and the audiobooks and Deezer music application can depend on the first authentication library. So, as we saw, it's not really a matter of content, but rather of organization. How do you organize your libraries and the content that you put in it? And actually, we are a bit caught between 2 trends. Either we want to make one very big library that has everything, but we saw that it doesn't work very well. Or the other trend would be to do a lot of very small libraries that have very specific scopes. But actually, that would become probably a maintenance hell, and that would be very cumbersome in terms of release management. And actually, it comes back a bit to the component cohesion principles mentioned by Uncle Bob. So what we did at Deezer, we tried to find the balance between these, and we did 3 libraries. So it's pretty close to the examples that we shown before. So we have a main features, ready-to-use features library, a bit like the authentication feature, as we mentioned, that handles everything in it. It relies on a core library that handles a player, synchronization and cache, some authentication, etc., and a design system, so reusable UI components. So now let's have a look. We will zoom in a specific library. So let's take the design system example. So for us, what we call a library, it is an independent Android project. So it is an Android project. It has a package name, and actually multiple modules. So when I say it is a library, actually it's kind of a group of library, because each of the modules will create its own artifact, jar or AR, and actually that is convenient so that clients, applications can only rely on the modules they need. For example, my audiobook application can only rely on the buttons module. You know also that there can be some transitive dependencies. So if buttons relies on colors, then my audiobooks will also depend on colors by transitivity. And last thing, very important, I will come back on this several times, we have a sample application for this project, for this library. This allows us, first of all, to be able to test and develop our components independently from the client applications. But then it also acts as a catalog of features, of components from your library, and as a living documentation, living example on how clients should integrate them. So in terms of integration, we use Nexus, which was a Maven repository. So it's exactly similar to integrating external libraries. Now, concerning version control, so at Deezer, we really have the philosophy to have a very independent project. So usually we have different GitHub repository for each project. So that's what we did at first for our libraries. So we have 3 GitHub repositories for each of our library. But then we realized that it was coming with a lot of issues. First of all, we have internal dependencies between our libraries. Features depends on core and on design system. That means a specific version of features can only rely on a specific version of core library and a specific version of design system. And second thing, since our own libraries also depend on external libraries, by transitivity, it can also create easily some clashes. So what we did in order to address this, well, you can guess, we did fusion. So we merged from 3 repositories to a single repository just for our Android libraries. Still, these libraries remain as independent Android projects, but we put on top all the common scripts and dependencies configuration, so when we declare versions. That way we can enforce alignment of our external dependencies. And second thing, we release our libraries all together under a unique version. Regarding the client projects, actually, we still continue to work with independent GitHub repository because we want them to be as independent as possible. Now let's see distribution. Regarding versioning, it's quite a standard pattern, and there is nothing fancy here. But the important thing to note here is that, as I mentioned earlier, we release all our libraries under a unique version altogether. And so one library, for example, features, can only depend on the same version of the other libraries, like core library and design system. Now, about Git flow, we use and release cycle. We use a release train of 2 weeks. And why? This is to follow, actually, the release cycle of our applications. Since we release our main application every 2 weeks, and we want to reduce as much as possible the integration delay, then we follow the same cycle, the same release cycle for our libraries. About publication, it's mostly automated. And the only thing I want to note here is that we use an internal nexus to host our artifacts, our libraries, so that our client applications can just integrate it easily, similarly to external libraries. I want to zoom in a bit about the publishing step, because as you saw, we want to release all of our libraries together at the same time under a unique version. But it's still independent Android projects. So how do we do that? Actually, we have a script outside of the Android projects that acts as an orchestrator. So what it does is it computes the unique version for all the libraries, and then it triggers the publication for targeting the nexus of each of our library. Now let's see the development process. So I want to come back very quickly on the requirements, because this will drive the decisions that we are doing here. So we want it to be easy to integrate, induce no integration delay, and allow a frequent change and API changes. So regarding Git flow on libraries, we have a main master branch that is our working branch. The thing to note here is that it can include API change, so breaking change at any time. And when we release a version, then we create a separate branch for this release. On application side, we have also a similar working branch, but we don't target the master branch from libraries, because we don't want it to be broken by API changes from the master branch. So we are only allowed to target stable versions. That doesn't need to be the latest one. It's just, it depends on your needs. But as we don't want to wait for 2 weeks when a component is just merged on the libraries to integrate it in our applications. We want to do it right away. So to do that, we have a separate branch that is called lib snapshot that actually targets the master branch, the working branch of the libraries. And also one thing to note is that for publication, we also release a snapshot version every night of the libraries. That way, we can really anticipate the integration of new components into our applications. Now, in order to reduce even more the integration delay, we even want to be able to develop our component on libraries and integrate it locally. So in order to do that, we use the same publishing script than before, but instead of targeting the Nexus, we target a local Maven. With a small change is that we also add a suffix to our package name that allows us to prevent any clash between the Nexus and our local version, and we make sure we either point to the one or the other, but there is no clash. And in order to point either to one or to the other, we have kind of a small switch. So we just set a specific property that is not under version control. And this property acts as the switch itself, just to add or not the suffix in order to point either to Nexus or to our local Maven. So this is just the trick to either point to Nexus or local libraries. So now let's take a concrete example on how the development process works. So let's say that we want to build a sharing, social network sharing feature. And for that, we need icons, social network icons, and we need to add them into our design system. So on the right, actually, it's the design system sample application. So the first step is obviously to add our icons into our design system based on master branch. Second thing, I publish all my libraries locally in order to have access to these new icons locally. Then on the application side, I will use my switch in order to point to target our local version. Then I can develop my feature relying on these icons. When it's done, I can create a pull request for design system part, for the library part. And then I can also create a pull request, since it's in a separate repository, for my feature in application. The thing to note here is that I provide the link of the design system pull request so that my CI can take it into account. Because since on design system it's only a pull request yet, it's not integrated yet, it's not in master branch, it's not on any snapshot. So it's only available as a pull request. So I provide this link so that my CI can take this pull request, build it locally to build my application, make all the tests run on my application. So that we can check that all is green, and once it is all good, then I can merge my pull requests on design system, on libraries, and then I publish a snapshot version on the Nexus. And then I can merge the pull request on application side. Now a quick word about documentation. So we use actually mkdocs, which is a static website generator that relies on Markdown. This way we can really have our documentation as Markdown files in our GitHub so that it's as close as possible to the code. And at the same time, it's also as static website where it is much easier to search and to navigate. Second thing, I mentioned that already, but I come back on that, is our sample apps. This is our most valuable documentation. So we have one sample app per library. And this, as I said, it acts as a catalog to be able to browse, to see, to discover every component from our libraries. And also, it acts as a living documentation for clients to understand how to integrate these features and these components into the application project. And last part, release notes. For the same reason, we need release notes for public libraries. It's exactly the same. That is the only way for our clients to understand the changes and to update the versions of your libraries. Some additional library development consideration. I think I won't have time to go deep, so just come to me if you have some questions afterwards. So now, lessons learned. Did it work well for us? Are we happy with our setup at Deezer? As you see in the beginning of the talk, we had some failures. So with Android TV first, with the modules integration, it was not very good. We had the issues with the compatibility versions between our libraries, where we had to merge, so we had to migrate every library into a single repository. And even in terms of code sharing and component sharing, we had some failures. I'll take just a very quick example of the synchronization, like download feature that we wanted to share between music application and audiobook application. So actually, the feature existed for a long time into our music application, but it was not modularized, it was not thought, it was not designed to be reusable. So we tried to extract it in the library, but it has done a really messy API because it was not designed at first to be reusable. So there was a lot of back and forth. We tried to handle it with delegates, but it was really bad in terms of API. And when we integrated in audiobooks application, it created a lot of bugs. So what we did at the end is that we have rewritten just the API for this synchronization feature. It is as an independent module, pure API, interface and models. And we have plugged our implementations of the synchronization component behind this API. And then we have integrated the new API into both applications. And that worked much, much better. But otherwise, for many other components, it was quite a success. For example, for the authentication feature, it was really supporting us to develop in much more efficient way multiple applications. So we are going toward more and more shared components as we are building more and more applications today. And we are still trying to improve our processes, but it's still something. So for us, it's overall quite a success, and we want to continue and to improve into that field. So just a quick word on, we are also working on a KMP library. It's actually kind of a core library of the core library that we are able to share between iOS, Android, and web. And this is actually a talk we did at Kotlin Coders in Paris, but in English, in last December. So you can have it. So key takeaways. So libraries, in order to share code among multiple projects, you can either share it as just source code, but that doesn't work for us, so be careful when you do that, or compiled artifact. Then the organization actually of libraries is key to foster reusability. Just keep in mind the example of the authentication feature. Distribution enables easy integration. So for us, we use the Nexus in order to ease the integration of the libraries for our client applications. Then Git flow and local publication can allow you to reduce as much as possible the integration delay. We saw how we could manage to make it almost as if we were working on a single project. It's a bit more complicated, but not that much. And finally, sample applications and documentation overall are really essential to ease and to support the library's usage for all of your applications. So that's it. Thank you. You have on the left a link of the slides, and on the right link to Deezer jobs as we're hiring. I'm not sure we have time for questions, but just come to me after the talk or just right now if you have any questions. Thank you.